After a time I began to grow uneasy. I could not tell how or why, but somehow I did not feel satisfied. Uneasiness is an instinct and means warning. The psychic faculties are often the sentries of the intellect, and when they sound alarm the reason begins to act, although perhaps not consciously. This was so with me. I began to bethink me where I was, and by what surrounded, and to wonder how I should fare in case I should be attacked. And then the thought suddenly burst upon me, although without any overt cause, that I was in danger. Prudence whispered, "Be still and make no sign." And so I was still, and made no sign, for I knew that 4 cunning eyes were on me. 4 eyes, if not more. My God, what a horrible thought! The whole shanty might be surrounded on 3 sides with villains. I might be in the midst of a band of such desperadoes as only half a century of periodic revolution can produce. With a sense of danger my intellect and observation quickened, and I grew more watchful than was my wont. I noticed that the old woman's eyes were constantly wandering toward my hands. I looked at them too, and saw the cause. My rings. On my left little finger I had a large signet, and on the right a good diamond. I thought that if there was any danger my first care was to avert suspicion. Accordingly I began to work the conversation round to rag-picking, to the drains, of the things found there, and so by easy stages to jewels. Then, seizing a favourable opportunity, I asked the old woman if she knew anything of such things. She answered that she did, a little. I held out my right hand, and showing her the diamond, asked her what she thought of that. She answered that her eyes were bad, and stooped over my hand. I said as nonchalantly as I could, "Pardon me, you'll see better thus," and taking it off, handed it to her. An unholy light came into her withered old face as she touched it. She stole one glance at me, swift and keen as a flash of lightning. She bent over the ring for a moment, her face quite concealed as though examining it. The old man looked straight out in front of the shanty before him, at the same time fumbling in his pockets and producing a screw of tobacco and a paper and a pipe, which he proceeded to fill. I took advantage of the pause and the momentary rest from the searching eyes on my face to look carefully round the place, now dim and shadowy in the gloaming. There still lay all the heaps of varied reeking foulness, there the terrible blood-stained axe, leaning against the wall in the right-hand corner, and everywhere, despite the gloom, the baleful glitter of the eyes of the rats. I could see them even through some of the chinks of the boards at the back, low down close to the ground. But stay, these latter eyes seemed more than usually large and bright and baleful. For an instant my heart stood still, and I felt in that whirling condition of mind in which one feels a sort of spiritual drunkenness, and as though the body is only maintained erect, and that there is no time for it to fall before recovery. Then, in another second, I was calm, coldly calm, with all my energies in full vigour, with the self-control which I felt to be perfect, and with all my feeling and instincts alert. Now I knew the full extent of my danger. I was watched and surrounded by desperate people. I could not even guess at how many of them were lying there on the ground behind the shanty, waiting for the moment to strike. I knew that I was big and strong, and they knew it too. They knew also, as I did, that I was an Englishman, and would make a fight for it. And so we waited. I had, I felt, gained an advantage in the last few seconds, for I knew my danger and understood the situation. Now, I thought, is the test of my courage, the enduring test. The fighting test may come later. The old woman raised her head and said to me in a satisfied kind of way, "A very fine ring indeed, a beautiful ring. Oh me, I once had such rings, plenty of them, and bracelets and earrings. Oh, for in those days I led the town a dance. But they've forgotten me now. They've forgotten me. They? Why, they never heard of me. Perhaps their grandfathers remember me, some of them." And she laughed a harsh, croaking laugh. And then I am bound to say that she astonished me, for she handed me back the ring with a certain suggestion of old-fashioned grace, which was not without its pathos. The old man eyed her with a sort of sudden ferocity, half rising from his stool, and said to me, suddenly and hoarsely, "Let me see it." I was about to hand him the ring, when the old woman said, "No, no, do not give it to Pierre. Pierre is eccentric. He loses things. And such a pretty ring." "Cat!" said the old man savagely. Suddenly the old woman said, rather more loudly than was necessary, "Wait! I shall tell you something about a ring." There was something in the sound of her voice that jarred upon me. Perhaps it was my hypersensitiveness, wrought up as I was to such a pitch of nervous excitement, but I seemed to think that she was not addressing me. As I stole a glance round the place, I saw the eyes of the rats in the bone heaps, but missed the eyes along the back. But even as I looked, I saw them again appear. The old woman's weight had given me a respite from attack, and the men had sunk back to their reclining posture.
"I once lost a ring, a beautiful diamond hoop that had belonged to a queen and which was given to me by a farmer of the Texas, who afterwards cut his throat because I sent him away. I thought it must have been stolen and taxed my people, but I could get no trace. The police came and suggested that it had found its way to the drain. We descended, I in my fine clothes, for I would not trust them with my beautiful ring. I know more of the drain since then, and of rats too, but I shall never forget the horror of that place, alive with blazing eyes, a wall of them just outside the light of our torches. Well, we got beneath my house. We searched the outlet of the drain, and there, in the filth, found my ring, and we came out. But we found something else also before we came. As we were coming toward the opening, a lot of sewer rats, human ones this time, came towards us. They told the police that one of their number had gone into the drain and had not returned. He had gone in only shortly before we had, and, if lost, could hardly be far off. They asked help to seek him, so we turned back. They tried to prevent me going, but I insisted. It was a new excitement, and had I not recovered my ring? Not far did we go, till we came on something. There was but a little water, and the bottom of the drain was raised with brick, rubbish, and much matter of the kind. He had made a fight for it, even when his torch had gone out. But there were too many for him. They had not been long about it. The bones were still warm, but they were picked clean. They had even eaten their own dead ones, and there were bones of rats as well as of the man. They took it cool enough, those others, the human ones, and joked of their comrade when they found him dead, though they would have helped him living. Bah! What matters it, life or death?
And you had no fear? I asked her.
Fear, she said with a laugh. Me have fear? Ask Pierre. But I was younger then, and as I came through that horrible drain with its wall of greedy eyes, always moving with the circle of the light from the torches, I did not feel easy. I kept on before the men, no. It is a way I have. I never let the men get it before me. All I want is a chance and a means. And they ate him up, took every trace away except the bones, and no one knew it. No one sound of him ever was made.
Here she broke into a chuckling fit of the ghastliest merriment which it was ever my lot to hear and see. A great poetess describes her heroine singing, "Oh, to see or hear her singing, scarce I know which is divinest." And I can apply the same idea to the old crone, in all save the divinity, for I scarce could tell which was the most hellish, the harsh, malicious, satisfied, cruel laugh, or the leering grin, and the horrible square opening of the mouth like a tragic mask, and the yellow gleam of a few discoloured teeth in the shapeless gums. In that laugh, and with that grin and the chuckling satisfaction, I knew, as well as if it had been spoken to me in words of thunder, that my murder was settled, and the murderers only bided the proper time for its accomplishment. I could read between the lines of her gruesome story the commands to her accomplices. "Wait," she seemed to say. "Bide your time. I shall strike the first blow. Find the weapon for me, and I shall make the opportunity. He shall not escape. Keep him quiet, and then no one will be the wiser. There will be no outcry, and the rats will do their work." It was growing darker and darker. The night was coming. I stole a glance round the shanty. Still all the same. The bloody axe in the corner, the heaps of filth, and the eyes on the bone heaps and in the crannies of the floor. Pierre had been still ostensibly filling his pipe. He now struck a light and began to puff away at it. The old woman said, "Dear heart, how dark it is! Pierre, like a good lad, light the lamp." Pierre got up, and with the lighted match in his hand touched the wick of a lamp which hung at one side of the entrance to the shanty, and which had a reflector that threw the light all over the place. It was evidently that which was used for their sorting at night. "Not that, stupid, not that, the lantern!" she called out to him. He immediately blew it out, saying, "All right, mother, I'll find it," and he hustled about the left corner of the room, the old woman saying through the darkness,
The lantern! The lantern! Oh, that is the light that is most useful to us poor folks. The lantern was the friend of the revolution. It is the friend of the chiffonier. It helps us when all else fails.
Hardly had she said the word when there was a kind of creaking of the whole place, and something was steadily dragged over the roof. Again I seemed to read between the lines of her words. I knew the lesson of the lantern. One of you get on the roof with a noose, and strangle him as he passes out, if we fail within. As I looked out of the opening, I saw a loop of rope outlined black against the lurid sky. I was now, indeed, beset. Pierre was not long in finding the lantern. I kept my eyes fixed through the darkness on the old woman. Pierre struck his light. By its flash I saw the old woman raise from the ground beside her, where it had mysteriously appeared, and then hide in the folds of her gown a long, sharp knife or dagger. It seemed to be like a butcher's sharpening iron fine to a keen point. The lantern was lit.
"Bring it here, Pierre," she said. "Place it in the doorway where we can see it. See how nice it is. It shuts out the darkness from us. It is just right."
Just right for her and her purposes. It threw all its light on my face, leaving in gloom the faces of both Pierre and the woman, who sat outside of me, on each side. I felt that the time of action was approaching, but I knew now that the first signal and movement would come from the woman, and so watched her. I was all unarmed, but I had made up my mind what to do. At the first movement I would seize the butcher's axe in the right-hand corner and fight my way out. At least I would die hard. I stole a glance round to fix its exact locality so I could not fail to seize it at the first effort, for then, if ever, time and accuracy would be precious. Good God! It was gone! All the horror of the situation burst upon me, but the bitterest thought of all was that if the issue of the terrible position should be against me, Alice would infallibly suffer. Either she would believe me false, and any lover, or anyone who has ever been one, can imagine the bitterness of the thought, or else she would go on loving long after I had been lost to her and to the world, so that her life would be broken and embittered, shattered with disappointment and despair. The very magnitude of the pain braced me up and nerved me to bear the dread scrutiny of the plotters. I think I did not betray myself. The old woman was watching me as a cat does a mouse, and had her right hand hidden in the folds of her gown, clutching, I knew, that long, cruel-looking dagger. Had she seen any disappointment in my face, she would, I felt, have known that the moment had come, and would have sprung on me like a tigress, certain of taking me unprepared. I looked out into the night, and there I saw a new cause for danger. Before and around the hut were at a little distance some shadowy forms, and they were quite still, but I knew that they were all alert and on guard. Small chance for me now in that direction. Again I stole a glance round the place. In moments of great excitement and of great danger, which is excitement, the mind works very quickly, and the keenness of the faculties which depend on the mind grow in proportion. I now felt this. In an instant I took in the whole situation. I saw that the axe had been taken through a small hole made in one of the rotten boards. How rotten they must be to allow of such a thing being done without a particle of noise. The hut was a regular murder trap, and was guarded all round. A garroter lay on the roof, ready to entangle me with his noose if I should escape the dagger of the old hag. In front the way was guarded by I know not how many watchers, and at the back was a row of desperate men. I had seen their eyes still, through the crack in the boards of the floor, when last I looked, as I lay prone, waiting for the signal to start erect. If it was to be ever, now for it.